everybody, and welcome to another episode of TFC Talks, where we dive into meaningful conversations about mental well-being, family connections, and personal growth. I'm your host, Amanda Davison, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and the CEO of The Family Connection, where we're committed to changing mental health. My guest today is Angelica Chavez, and I'm so excited to have her here with us to talk about really taking a pause back from the rush and the heaviness of life and taking time to reflect. Angelica Chavez is a licensed counselor, and she is really skilled at just being able to sit with you and use her presence to help ask questions and draw things out of you. So having her sit with us today to talk about self-reflection is such an important nugget and such a treasure, because she really does this with everyone she's with on a daily basis. So thank you so much, Angelica, for joining us today. I'm really excited to sit at your feet and learn.
Thank you so much for having me, Amanda. It's really an honor.
So let's talk a little bit about what is self-reflection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what it's not.
Mm-hmm. Self-reflection is turning inwards. It's the ability to sit with yourself and be present to your thoughts, your emotions, your needs, your motivations, the things that are within you in the daily life. And it's an important thing to do. It's a skill, definitely, that needs to be built. But it's something that I think everyone should learn to do.
Is it something, so you're saying it's a skill. It's not something we're just naturally born with, and some people have it and some people don't.
Right. It's something that I think everyone can learn to do. I think it's something that is innate within us, but it just takes some time to tap into because of the busyness of life and of the world.
So how do we do that? Functionally, what are some skills that help us to cultivate that reflection muscle?
Yeah, I think being able to set aside some time is going to be important. Now, there's a few different things there. We don't want this to be burdensome for people. I think being able to, first off, sit with yourself, right? So maybe spending some time at the end of the day is going to be a really helpful thing in asking yourself questions, right? So you want to know, what are you feeling? What am I thinking? What did I go through this day? What did I go through this week? And how did that impact me? And so truly just being present with yourself is important. Now, it can be difficult to how the heck do I be present to myself in the midst of a really busy world, right?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about sounds easy, but functionally is very difficult. And one of the key things I hear in that is it's a practice of discipline, right? It's not something that we sit with ourselves once.
Right.
And then we've got it. So what are some ways that somebody could integrate that in with discipline into their already busy schedule and make it manageable for themselves?
Yeah, we're looking for consistency, right? We're looking for sustainability in daily life. And so we can do things like journaling, right? That's one tool that you can use, and asking yourself one simple question, I feel, and going from there and allowing yourself to just write. But, it doesn't always have to be sitting down and doing something like that. It's in any moment being able to turn yourself inwards and asking yourself, what was that like, right? Taking a deep breath, that fall air feels really good. Right? That is self-reflection. That is being present to yourself. And again, that's building that skill to be able to sit with yourself. And so I would say it's really moment by moment being able to just turn inwards.
I love that. I love that simple practice of building that muscle. And it kind of makes me think of even mindful eating, right? That idea of in between bites, setting your fork down and just letting you experience that bite as its own kind of unique experience. And then picking up the fork again to have your next bite, and just slowing down that process and giving yourself an opportunity to really experience what you're going through.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us, you're so skilled at this and you make it look flawless and so easy. And I know that it's not easy because I just know the work, but what are some disciplines, if we were to observe you, what would we see you doing that helps you show up the way that you do?
Well, daily, and it may seem silly from the outside, but it's being vulnerable. It's being authentic. And so when something doesn't sit right, you might see it on my face, right? Because that's an experience. And though I can put that aside and be able to sit and be present with someone, there's still an authenticity that needs to be there, and recognizing, like, wait, I didn't understand that question, or I don't really know how that felt for me, right? And so that's an important thing, I think, for myself, in that people respond well to authenticity, and I respond well to authenticity. Right? So being present to that, like, what am I experiencing, and showing that with others as well.
I love that there's a level of vulnerability that you naturally kind of embrace, and even maybe not naturally, but you've learned to embrace, right? And in being able to not judge the experience. Like, what I hear you saying is, that was my experience. I'm not moving forward. I'm not moving backwards, but I'm just acknowledging that was my experience in the moment.
Right.
How would you help somebody else do that?
Well, I think people come from different cultures, different religions, right? And so it's specific to the person. I think for myself, it would of course be faith, right? And that's something that helps me turn inwards. That helps me move forward in things. And so I think working with someone would be having them find what they feel comfortable with, what fills their cup, what allows them to see the world differently, and allows them to see themselves in a way that is reminding themselves that they matter.
Can you give some experiences or examples of, like, people you've maybe worked with or in your life, and ways that they've used self-reflection in lots of different avenues?
Yeah, absolutely. I think self-reflection, I see a lot of nature, right? So nature, getting out, going on walks, trying out exercise is really important, because what we're doing is we're using our five senses and grounding ourselves into a present moment, and nothing gets us there quicker than outdoors, right? And so being able to do that, I think, is something that I've seen a lot of people use, and you'll notice that you'll come back feeling refreshed, right? You hear that a lot, like, I went on a walk and it was so nice. I'm going to add that into my routine. And I think that's one way that people really do find themselves connecting to their bodies and to the world around them.
Yeah, I love that idea of, like, just kind of stepping out, changing that environment for a moment, getting into some of that physical activity, letting yourself experience it, and then come back with a fresh or renewed perspective, and maybe some tired calves, depending on your exercise level. Maybe it's just me. Anything else that you can think of for other people that are, like, ways that you've seen people integrate this self-reflection?
Of course, things like meditation, right? So learning to sit in silence. We have a busy world, and being able to set aside time for yourself is a sign of self-respect, right? And so learning to have silence, and we can do that in a lot of different ways. We know we're busy, it's not, it can be a luxury to have that silence or to have that quiet time for yourself. But being able to do that in the midst of a busy world is important. So even, again, like in the middle of a meeting, of course you're not going to zone out, but being able to sit and, like, there's a silence in what I'm experiencing right now. That is something you carry. And so learning that, what works for you, whether it's going to a chapel, whether it's going to the mountainside, whether it's going to your room, it's specific to the person. But those are the ways that I would really recommend that, is sitting in silence and learning to be comfortable with yourself.
Yeah, I love that idea of just kind of integrating it into everyday life. And it makes me think of a couple people in my life and the way that they integrated in different seasons of my life. I remember being a busy working mom, and, peace was just a luxury, right? It wasn't something that I naturally, was naturally easily present in my environment. And I remember that shower, which often was like a 5-minute, like, rinse off and, like, step out and hope that chaos was calmed, at least for a moment. But I remember those 5 minutes in the shower and just feeling the water rush over was a way of just kind of resetting me. Right. And so that kind of makes me think of, is that an example of self-reflection?
Absolutely. right? It's anytime you're setting aside, and it can be moment to moment. This can sound really taxing, and it's not. We want it to, again, to be sustainable. And so those little moments in the shower, those little moments of deep breaths as we turn around to get the bottle for the baby, right? No one's seeing the stress or the fear or the crying that we're doing. It's those little moments that are self-reflection, right? It doesn't always feel good, but it is always beneficial.
I love that. It doesn't always feel good, but it is always beneficial. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to really equate feeling good with being good, or feeling bad with being bad. How do we break that thought process?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I mean, it's so hard, right? It
Yeah.
sounds easy, but it's so hard when it
It's
just
so
feels
hard.
natural.
I think we get stuck in black and white, right? So if something's good, it's good. Great, I don't have to do anything about it. If it's bad, it's bad. I don't want to stay away from it. And that's not the reality of life. And I think, again, that compassion for yourself has to come in, that if something doesn't feel good, a lot of times it's an opportunity for growth, and also knowing that it's hurting, right? And if self-reflection is all about sitting with your pain or sitting with your experience, like, there has to be compassion in that. And the bad experience isn't something we run from. It's something we have to learn to deal with and get through, right? Because we have the ability to.
I love that you bring that up in terms of like really just thinking about, is this growth like serving me, right? Is this pain serving me? And if it's growth focused, it'll have a growth edge or an opportunity in it. Whereas if it's something that's not healthy, like it will be really hard to find a growth opportunity in it, even if it feels bad, right? Like, and so really being able to separate those things out and do exactly what you just naturally do, is pause and then really reflect on asking ourselves some questions about what could be happening here and how can we use it to further our own development.
Right. Self-reflection is about that, right? It's not just, okay, I feel this, that's it, right? It can also be taking that step further. And again, that's a skill to build of, okay, so how do I mimic what felt good or what went well for me? And how can it change what I played into and what didn't feel good or what didn't go well for me? And that's self-reflection.
I love that. And I think one of the other things that's so easy to overlook, but you naturally just did when I asked the question, was you just took a second and you paused. And it may seem so simple, but that pause is so powerful. Tell us a little bit about that pause and how you make it look effortless, but really what's going on within you within that second.
I think that's something I learned a long time ago, and it just I think it was just like a tip in probably some sort of like communications class or something of like holding your power. And I think that's important for yourself, and going back to that vulnerability of like, you feel like you might have to have the answer immediately, or you might need to know exactly what it is, right? And you don't. I need a moment. Right? And that's learning yourself, and again, holding that power of, even if I don't know, or even if it's not well received, I'm okay with taking my moment to say something that is authentic to myself or what I truly believe.
I really just love the way that you're honoring yourself in that. And part of self-reflection, if what I'm capturing through this thread is a way of knowing yourself, to lead yourself, to honor yourself.
Self-respect. Right.
Self-respect. Tell us more about what that means.
Self-respect, I think what we're looking at is, and the busyness in life, that we get lost, right? So everyone matters. And when you self-reflect, you're saying to yourself, I matter. Right? I deserve the time to know myself, to improve my life, to take care of myself. And it's kind of like going to a doctor and not telling them that I fell yesterday and broke my arm. Right? I'm just not going to get what I need from them. Right? But we're doing this with ourselves. If I don't know how I'm showing up or how something impacted me, I'm not going to really know why I had that really big breakdown, right? Or why I had that really big blow up with someone. And that's what self-honoring is, and self-respect is knowing yourself, right? And treating what is present to you.
How do we battle like that perception, like or walk the line between self-honoring and selfish?
That's a great question.
Especially, I think, I think we can look at generational differences. I think we can look at, gender and identity differences and cultural differences. How do we find the nuance in between that?
The nuance in between
Selfishness and self-honoring.
I think it can seem like there's a very thin line there, but I think it's actually something that can very easily be intentional as well, right? When we are engaged in self-care, especially if we are really busy and we're having a hard time doing that, right? That's already a sign that we need it. Right? And not taking it is selfish for ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like not taking it is a way of being selfish, because later down the line there's going to be a cost. Right? It's that gas that's maybe like put in there,
Right.
or not getting gas in the gas tank, because that's like something I hate, right? Not taking that time is actually going to have an effect later on.
Right. And I would say that when someone is struggling to even give that to themselves, that's a sign that it's not selfish, right? It's not going to be selfish for you to sit with yourself and give yourself time. And we can think that it might be like, I can't step away from my kids. I can't step away from my job. But that's, again, the sign that, no, you need that. It's not selfish to do those kinds of things, right? Now, if we're neglecting what we need to do, our responsibilities, that's a different story. But I would say that's pretty rare to come by when we're trying to self-reflect, or when we're trying to be present to ourselves and how to show up in the world. So that's a big part of the goal.
Yeah, I love that, because you brought back that piece of presence, right? And I think self-reflection is so much about the present. Like, how do I want to show up?
Right.
What am I experiencing? How is this in line with who I am? Or I think sometimes selfishness is so focused in the future on, this is what I deserve.
Right.
This is how I think it should be, right? And we get caught up in the shoulds and really not acknowledging the present. Or we get so focused on that one feeling that I don't feel happy all of the time when I go to the gym, right? I don't always love that experience. So therefore I should not do it because I don't love that experience, without using that muscle of self-reflection to say, why am I going to the gym? What is the intention of the gym? And really being able to sit in the present moment and go back to the why.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you brought up values there, and that's a big portion of it, right? Is knowing why I do something and how does that serve me, but also we do live in the bigger context of the world, and so our values help guide us in that, but I have to know what those are, and I have to be able to live within them.
I really like that you were able to hone in on that values piece. How does values tie in, or how would somebody identify their values through the process of self-reflection?
I think values can be, again, something that is pulled in from culture, from religion, from where we grew up, right? And so that's one thing that we have to look at and see, how did this serve me? How did this not serve me? And how is it impacting how, again, I'm showing up?
Yeah, so really, how does it impact how I'm showing up? That really speaks to relationships. And we live in a society that has interdependence, right? And so how does the act of self-reflection help us show up better in our relationships? And how does not having the act of self-reflection and working that muscle, how does that maybe negatively impact our relationships?
I think compassion plays in there, because self-reflection is practicing that compassion towards yourself and sitting with it. And if you're not capable of doing that with yourself, and we all have that bandwidth to do so, but if we haven't flexed that muscle in a while, right, looking at another person, it's going to be really difficult to give that compassion to them. Because I'm running on fumes. Why are you complaining right now? I can't deal with that, right? There's things that need to be addressed within yourself. And so I think self-reflection opens that ability to be compassionate to yourselves as well, and then open up to what the other person's needing, as well as advocating for your own needs.
I really like that it really is the muscle that leads us into being able to be in a healthy relationship, as a healthy partner or, collaborator or whatever that might look like, and maybe not having that muscle. What does it look like? How might it show up if our muscles are pretty deconditioned or weak in that self-reflection? How might we see that show up in relationships?
I'd say some shutdown in a relationship and communication. You'll see it in how you're responding to the other person, because that's often how you're responding to yourself, right? So you'll see some of that conflict or that avoidance of conflict is we're not quite sure what I'm feeling or what I need in the moment, or how the week, the month, the day has impacted me. And so you'll see that a lot in conflict. You might also see it in withdrawing, right? And so it's going to impact, like, what is wrong with the other person when I'm pulling away? What is wrong with my partner? Why are they pulling away in those situations? Well, maybe they're running low on some things, but they don't know it.
I love that you really, that's so wise to really connect how we experience somebody might actually be how we're experiencing ourselves. And I think of relationships where they have maybe huge emotional blow-ups, right? And constantly in this state of angst. And it's so curious to me to think, if we don't pause, right, do some of those muscle building techniques that you're talking about, walks, taking time, asking ourselves questions, journaling, doing those kinds of things. If we don't do those things, then it actually ends up in this major explosion. And we're constantly in a state of high emotionality, and it's really draining.
Right.
How does somebody break out of that cycle?
Of that heightened emotion? Well, first thing is to be aware of it. Right? That's hard to do, but that's what self-reflection is. Right? Sitting with yourself, and things like emotion regulation are going to be important. So taking care of yourself, taking those deep breaths, grounding yourself back to the present moment, and again, I have to really harp on the reflection part of it, is recognizing that this is where I'm at, this is what I need, and communication is going to be a key part of that. And so breaking out of emotion a lot of times is just being compassionate to it. What we know about mental health and what we know about our emotions is that sometimes it just needs attention for it to reduce and to be able to manage. You do have the ability to manage it. You just need to acknowledge it.
I love that. It's kind of like that little kid who's like, Mom, 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 right? The act of ignoring that little kid is not going to make that little kid get quieter or go away. It's actually the turning to and saying, I see you, even if I can't deal with you right now, or I have to address this first, but it's I see you, actually is what calms that little child voice and that child voice within us down.
Right. And if I can calm that, if I can see that I have the control over that, right, I can show up a little bit differently in my daily life. The control, that ability to know yourself and then also to help yourself is huge.
I love that. What do you think about doing a couple of exercises or questions that somebody might be able to ask themselves and be able to integrate that in?
I think some of my favorite things to do are asking myself the highs and lows of the day. And that's a really good place to start, right? What's gone really well today? What didn't go very well today? As a place to just, okay, first, am I aware of what the day brought for me, right? And then go deeper into that. So that's one way I think is really helpful, and just letting that pass by, right? Man, that was really hard that happened, and I'm sorry that I experienced that, right? That's just one way. So being able to identify it, give a little bit of compassion, move forward.
I love that it wasn't like a place where you felt like you needed to right a wrong or, riot or ignore it. You just kind of said, yeah, that was really hard. And now I'm moving forward.
And they may come up again, right? That's okay. Let it.
So wise. So as we talk about some of the tips for self-reflection, let's give some of our listeners just some prompts to ask themselves some of those questions. One of the things I really like is this 5-question prompt of how to deal with emotions. So it's 5 questions, thinking using all 5 of your fingers. 1, what am I feeling? 2, what caused these feelings? 3, what do I want to do with these feelings? 4, is there another way I can view this situation? And then 5, how can I cope with these feelings in a healthy way? This really helps me use and exercise that muscle of self-reflection to really see what's going on with me, and I hope it'll help you.
Another thing you can do that is really simple for self-reflection is something called leaves on a stream. And so it's allowing yourself to sit and to notice what thoughts, emotions come up for you, and just watching them as they flow as a leaf on a stream. Just going by, just noticing them there and letting them flow through. Right? Not having to change anything, not having to do anything about it, just noticing it and letting them move on through.
So, Angelica, there's so much wisdom in this act of self-reflection. How do we integrate it and keep it as part of an ongoing practice? Mm-hmm. What recommendations would you have for our listeners?
Mm-hmm. I think be patient with yourself. Right? This is something that you're learning to do not for just the time being or a season. This is something long-term and lifelong that you want to use, right? And so the goal here is to be able to improve and show up as the best person, the best part of yourself. And that's self-reflection is just the vehicle in getting there. And so being patient, enjoying the journey, and noticing what comes up, asking for help when you need it.
I love that. Asking for help and just really focusing. And I think of that just being 1% better, right? I don't need to conquer the mountain. I just need to be 1% better today than I was yesterday. And that's going to have exponential growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
This exercise in self-reflection and this muscle development is such a key resource and so helpful for us to show up and be healthy with who we want to be and healthy in relationships. And I just want to thank you so much, Angelica, for your wisdom and your poise. It is truly such an honor to get to sit at your feet and to have our listeners get the opportunity and privilege to learn from you like I do almost every day.
Thank you so much for having me, Amanda. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today and just being able to, oops, I said that to you already, so never mind. Blah, blah, blah. It's so clear how powerful self-reflection can be for personal growth, healing, and even for improving our relationships with others. To our listeners, if today's conversation inspired you, I encourage you to take a few moments this week to pause and reflect. Start small. Maybe jot something down, a few thoughts at the end of the day. Maybe use that stream exercise to really just observe and watch them flow through. Whether it's during your morning coffee, maybe it's during a run, or it's maybe just those couple minutes you have to yourself for a quick shower. Remember, it's the little steps that lead to big changes over time. Thank you for tuning in to TFC Talks. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, share it with someone who might need a little gentle reminder to self-reflect, have compassion for themselves, and I really just encourage you to join us next time as we continue to explore the ways to foster a balanced, meaningful life. Until next time, take care and keep growing.